Good morning, all my blessed beloveds back out there, not back there. It's Rusty at Living and Thriving. Hi everybody. Today's guest is Sadhu Dah, and he's logging in right now, and I look forward to hearing who and what makes Sadhu, maybe? Tick.
All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't pronounce your damn name. Darn it. I keep stumbling over, and I don't know if it's just because I'm very white or...
Sadhu Dah. Sadhu Dah.
Sadhu Dah. Perfect. Okay, so origin.
Well, I myself am African and Mexican.
Okay.
But sadhu is a term from Eastern culture, specifically within the Vedic traditions of ancient India.
That's what I thought. And I'm sitting here going, Sadhu. I wasn't sure. But cool, you're here. And it's Living and Thriving time. And we get to just get into it. So who are you? What do you do? And what makes you you?
Very good question. So who I am, in the simplest terms, is just a guy who got tired of living with so much pain and screaming at the world that I decided to go inward and find myself. What I do is I help other people go inward and find themselves. And I guess the third part of the question was, if you could repeat that.
What do you do?
Oh, what do I do? Yeah. So the whole helping people go inward, that usually consists with various traditions, whether it be Theravada Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, or some yogic practices, pranayama, breathing control, things of that nature, hypnosis work. I kind of dive into people's subconscious, help them rewrite their neurology and dissolve the trauma from within so that they can become a healthier version of themselves.
And so do you have a short title like guru of rewiring or anything?
I just kind of go by sadhu because a sadhu is like an aesthetic, a sage, somebody which would be the equivalent in Native American terms as a shaman.
All right, very cool. And what state or country are you located in?
I am in Washington State.
Oh, I love Washington State, though it cries a lot. Washington cries a lot.
We do have some cold winters and we have lots of rain, but the summers, you just can't beat them.
Well, and the people are just so darn nice up there, too. It's one of the few states where I'm like, you know what? I'd go back in a heartbeat in the summer. I don't do winter. I'm over winter. I'm too old for that. But the people are just really nice and very welcoming and very pleasant. So, yeah, what a cool state.
Yeah, I kind of love it here.
So talk to us a little bit more about your process. Like, what kind of pain were you going through? Was it mental, emotional, physical, all of the above?
Quite a bit, actually. A little backstory. My mother and my father both did years in prison. I grew up with a lot of gang violence, a lot of drug addiction and drug dealing. And I was very confused not having good role models when I was a child. And when I got a little bit older, I want to say my late teens, I met a man named Brandon Masoner. And he taught me how to be a man where no one else would. Now, understanding Brandon, this is when I was cage fighting, another life. But he was very aggressive, a bit misogynistic, a little bit ego-filled, had a raging heroin addiction. But at that point in my life, he was the most positive role model that I'd ever had and the first person to actually care about my well-being. So I kind of clung to him. And it wasn't until Brandon passed away from a drug overdose that I found myself without a life preserver. And I was very, very angry. I kind of felt like the world cheated me. And soon after, I met a Theravada bhikkhu, a monk from the Thai tradition of Buddhism named Tanaphol Pakdee. And Thanaphol didn't judge me for my tattoos. He didn't judge me for the noticeable chip on my shoulder. Instead, he just approached me with pure loving kindness, or in Theravada tradition, they call metta. And it was really interesting for me because my whole life, I always felt like, one, I wasn't worthy of love, and everything was an enemy. And even if it wasn't an enemy, I was going to find a way in my mind to rationalize how to put up a boundary and push you away because it's too messy to look inside. You can't see me because I'm not even worth seeing me. Over time, though, I found myself doing these practices of like walking meditation, chanting and inciting mantra, doing breathing control work, and meeting other masters and teachers along the way. And little bit by little bit, that angry little boy inside of me started to feel worthy of love. And I don't know exactly where it was, but at some point he found his way home into my heart. And I woke up one day, not realizing when, but just kind of having the realization that I love myself and I don't hate the world anymore.
So let's back up a little bit. And I love Buddhism. I love Buddhist monks, and they're just amazing. The energy is amazing. The conversations are so healing. So I appreciate that route that you've taken, much more than I think you knew before you came on. But larger, parents with addiction, an environment with addiction, crime, no real support system. I mean, it sounds like my story in a lot of ways. How are you, or were you able to get out of your own head? Because as you know, those stories repeat over and over again, and you do everything that you can to keep people at a distance because you know they're either going to be, they're going to hurt you in some way, or they're going to get drugged up on whatever it is, or they're going to go to jail, or they're going to die. So there's nothing that's going to penetrate this child and allow anybody in. How did you work out of that process? Because it is a cycle.
It very much so is. And it's a very daunting task to approach. And nobody would have blamed me for becoming the statistic that society had printed upon me. But I had a bigger vision for myself, whether I saw it then or not. And approaching it, I needed help, first of all. I couldn't do all the work by myself. I did the work, yes. I'm the only one who could have done the work, but I couldn't do it by myself. I needed to establish and build a support system. And that's what I found with my teachers and my masters who helped me along the way. And the actual process for me was confronting these fractured versions of my personality across the timeline of my life, and being able to mentally, or I should say subconsciously, go back and knowing that I'm not changing the past, but I'm giving the emotional love and support to those versions of myself in that time in the memory that never got it. Being able to be the supporting and loving, proud father that I never had when I was a child, because my dad was in prison and my dad was physically abusive. Being able to be the understanding and trusting and loving mother that I never had when my mom was very manipulative and always abusing drugs and neglecting me. Being able to teach myself where I didn't have teachers, knowing that I wasn't undoing any of the trauma itself memory-wise, but I was stripping the emotional charge behind those memories. I was rewriting that in my neurology and letting that adrenal response run out and giving loving, solid, supportive feelings back to those parts of me that had been screaming out for years.
So how many children do you have?
I have one
How old?
boy, 5 years old.
Oh my gosh. So like in that fun, creative, twirly, nose picking, catching butterflies age. I love it.
Yeah, he's a very interesting little guy. very stubborn. I see a lot of myself in him. But one of the things I'm really grateful for being a parent is he's not getting the childhood I got. He's getting something much better. And seeing him happy and thriving, it makes my heart explode.
I too have a tumultuous background, and I have a 16-year-old. She just turned 16.
Ooh.
She's so amazing. Like, she's so cool, and so she's been so much fun to watch grow up. She's really going to be a rock star in her own space, you know. And I look at her, and even throughout the whole time of being a mom, I'm like, why would I hit her for that? Like, why would I put her down for that? Why would I prevent her from doing this or that dance class or choral or any of those things that happened to me as a child? And I think in a lot of ways I was able to, not perfectly, but give her a better version of me because I had such compassion as to the child within me who didn't have that compassion. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. You naturally want what's better for your own children, but for some people that instinct isn't natural because the trauma that they have had is just too much that they can't hear that desire inside of them of, I don't want this cycle to continue.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I know I'm not wired that way. Like, I'm not wired in the same super trauma attack person that my parent was to me. So it's been interesting to see the other way of living and kind of question, like, why would I do that if I was in their shoes? Because you really don't understand what's going on in another person's head, right?
Never. We never could. We can get ideas, but we don't truly know.
Well, and I think it's interesting how we're wired and pre-programmed in some ways, which is more spiritually driven, which you and I fairly share the same kind of path. We always knew innately that there was something better to strive for. So all of the times that we got dark, you know, there was like a little ping, no, don't, just keep going. And that's how we've been able to master where we are now, right?
Yeah, for me, it was really interesting that you mentioned that little ping because there would be several moments in my life when I was younger where I had all this negative influence around me and nothing positive or encouraging. But in my own mind, I was like, there's something not right about this.
Yeah, and that's where we get to sit back as spiritual people and say, huh, okay, you know, my ancestors, there's a whole lot of them behind me supporting me through this process, and they keep knocking me on the head. And I guess that's where the drive came from this whole time. I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
It certainly is.
So what is your why? I mean, you have a 5-year-old boy who you just love and adore, because 5 is actually a really cool age. 16, not terrible. 16's fun and snarky, you know, kind of humorous age. So don't be afraid. Um, but you know, what is your why in life now?
That is a question that I go back and forth on with the answer. I'd say right now, my why in life is to serve my community, going to school for nursing. I work as a med tech in an assisted living facility. I have such a strong passion for our senior citizens. And it's something that kind of like puzzles me because I never would have imagined that that would be something I'd be drawn to career wise. And, you know, I kind of would imagine, okay, well, yeah, me working with, you know, people afflicted by addiction in a rehab type setting, that makes sense. Special needs children or victims of bullying or, you know, children that are vulnerable in a sense, that makes sense. But senior citizens, that just kind of blows my mind a little bit, but I have such a passion for it. I'm so good at my job and I love going to work. And I guess my why right now is approaching what I'm already doing in a more fulfilled manner and getting better at it and more educated in it and just continuing to see where that path takes me.
Doesn't it kind of amaze you if you were to sit back in your timeline? And I know for me, I just go, oh my gosh, it's been there the whole time. But if you look back on your whole timeline and really do a good write-up of different parts of your life, the healer has always been there. Always been there. However that manifests later on, it's always been, you've always been attracted to wanting to be that person to heal somebody else. And I love the fact that you're into seniors, because that makes sense with your name and your journey. You know, you're with elders who, for those who are not very deeply spiritual, elders are kind of the foundation of every society. They're the ones that share the story and share the history and guide you through life, and they're extremely integral. Americans, and I can only speak as an American because I don't really know what elder care is like outside of America, but we like to put them in homes, and that's a very lonely existence.
It's heartbreaking. I've worked at a number of different facilities. The first one I worked at, which this one I'm working at right now, is one that I really support and I love, and I appreciate how they do things. But the first facility I worked at was an intensive memory care unit, and it was for very progressed Alzheimer's and dementia residents. And it was really astounding to me how childlike and scared these people in their 80s and 90s were, and how they were almost like babies in a way, and they had no idea what was going on. And their families, for the most part, it's understandable that some of them lived out of state, or that it was too emotionally difficult for them to see a loved one in that kind of state. But they were so lonely and they were so hurt. And the best thing I could do is just try to put a smile on their face, even if they're going to forget it moments later that it ever happened. The facility I work at now, though, it's not as bad. These people are mostly independent. They have lots of family that visits, and you can have full-blown conversations with them, and it's just kind of a night and day difference with some of the other facilities that I've worked at. But in general, rest homes for our seniors, America's really, really lacking on the ability to care for our elderly.
I was reading an article not too long ago about a test that they're doing in Canada. My Canadian friends love you. They're actually raising orphans in rest homes. So you get the grandparent energy, and the child gets the parent's, guidance and that kind of energy. And the elderly people, the people who are living in the rest home, get to feel a little younger because they have the child energy going. And evidently it's extremely successful because the orphans, they don't have a lot of support, but at least they get to grow into these elder type relationships. And I was like, why don't we do more of that? I think they do that in Switzerland and Finland as well.
That's a really good idea. And that can have a profound effect on both sides. I mean, that's huge. Plus you're making your society better. I mean, these kids who might have gone down a different path, having this love that they weren't getting to begin with, and this support system, I mean, they're going to be your future doctors, your future lawyers, therapists, school teachers, etc. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate about having daycares in nursing homes too. Obviously, vetting everybody for,
right.
But I think it's important to have that elder energy, as well as to keep our elders a little younger by having child energy. There's nothing like finger painting with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, or talking about spaceships and aliens and like exploring the world through a child's eye. It really opens up, I think, a molecular level, and we thrive on that.
Oh yeah. I mean, the concept of mirror neurons, you connect with somebody, you build enough rapport with them, and certain aspects of your neurology and your personality are going to, over time, with enough of that similar interaction, kind of shift a little. It can be a very healing process for both parties involved.
Yeah. And so I'm a huge advocate for it. Huge, huge, huge. Throwing that out there in the universe. So what does life look like for you now? What does your wife do? And how did you get to a place where you could have a relationship without having that fear from childhood? Let's get into that piece.
Well, I'm not married currently. So that's a thing, but everything is in good settings on that end with my son's mother. But right now, what life looks like for me, I balance my side practice of spiritual healing and teaching with people, as well as doing my responsibilities of work. And then I also make music in my spare time. See the keyboard, and see I have the nice mic. So I do a lot of art. Recently got back into drawing. I had a lot of trauma around drawing, just because I had some very unpleasant people in the past, and I kind of shared some of my art with them, and they burned it in front of me, and that was like, yeah, that's like a whole nother thing. But I started doing my art again. I play some video games from time to time. I'm very just immersive in the world and expressive, and I'm all about new experiences and doing new things. And I do a lot of like gung fu and qigong. I like to move with my body. Really, I'm all about life experience and doing and being. It's so exciting to be alive. I don't think enough people really put thought into putting one foot after the other, or waking up each day and knowing the unlimited possibilities of what you can do. Even if you have work and family to take care of, there's so many things you can do in a day. It just excites me.
You must have read my Facebook post this morning, because that's how I woke up this morning.
Is that really how you woke up?
Yeah. I woke up with this whole idea of rinse and repeat. Like most people just rinse and repeat their yesterday. And I have grown into this place where, once a lot of things have healed for me from past wonderful people that you and I seem to somehow shared, I find that life is a curious adventure. Like I find myself really ornery and wanting to break things apart and wanting to learn more and explore more, like a little kid would, and I can't do the whole rinse and repeat thing. I get so excited about getting out of bed in the morning and having my coffee and watching the sunrise and looking at my puppies. I think it's just it's like new eyes. Did you feel that way when you came out of your darker phase?
Oh yeah, I would see things I'd seen countless times before, but it was like it had a new shade or tint of color to it, or I noticed a detail that I just never noticed before, and it could have been something I'd seen hundreds of times. And I still have that experience quite a bit with just everything around me. One of the things I really like doing is going on walks to the same places and just noticing how different the weather and temperature and like the seasons, and just every little thing, that no matter how many times I take the same walk, it is never the same. It might be the same walk, but it is not the same walk. And it's so exciting, because many people will just be like, oh yeah, I'm walking to the store, or, I'm going to work. And it's like, yeah, but are you noticing how much is different every time you do this same thing? Kind of like Georgia O'Keeffe with her paintings. And she would draw something over and over and over, and people would be like, well, why would you draw a door 100 times? It's like, well, I didn't draw it 100 times. Every time I drew it, it was different. My mood was different. The way I was seeing it was different. The light was different. And I mean, that's just, I relate with that so much.
So where are your parents now? Are they alive? Are they doing well? Are they?
My mom has a terminal heart condition from years of drug abuse.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad because, you know, I'll be 31 this year. My mom had me when she was 17. She's still pretty young as far as a parent goes for having, you know, a 30-year-old child. And I have to face the realization that there's a clock on her. I mean, there's a clock on everybody, but it's more apparent. My mom has like 3 to 5 years from what the doctor gave her, and that was about 2 years ago. So I've done a lot of repair and communication with my mom, but at the same time, there's just a lot that we don't have enough time to process and work through. So I value the time I do have with my mom and the interactions I have with her. She lives back in Texas where I grew up. And my dad, I don't really know where he is. I try to keep my distance from him. Every once in a while, he'll randomly hit me up asking me for money or some sort of illegal activity he wants me to get involved in. And that's really the only time I ever hear from him. No happy birthdays or anything like that. I know that he's still actively using meth. I know he's still gang affiliated at the very least. But I don't let that affect me anymore, which is huge because that, you know, daddy and mommy issues all day long, that used to rule my life. But I'm in a good place now.
I love the fact that you acknowledge that, you know, there's a lot of wounds there and you're taking ownership as to how much you're willing to allow in your life now, because you're a new version of you. I always say I'm Rusty 2.4500, whatever that means, right? Like I've uploaded and downgraded something. And I love the fact that you're able to heal what you can with your mom in the time that she's here. It makes me wonder, and I don't know about you, but what was their purpose in life? Was it to teach us this lesson, or was it to teach themselves whatever lesson they got out of it? Like, I always believe that we have a set contract before we come here. And I find it very curious how people live out their contract, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that sometimes when we're born into families, it's just a simple vessel to get us here. It's not necessarily what we fantasize in our head as this loving, doubting relationship that was, oh, you know, perfect family life. And I think that kind of, for me, it gives me a little peace.
For my mom, it's interesting because I've often kind of seen it with my mom as I think she came here to learn how to love, as many of us are here, whether it's to love oneself or to love others or love others through ourselves. And unfortunately, because of my mom's not inability to overcome a lot of things that were put on her, but I would say not necessarily seeing and recognizing herself and what she has to offer is probably what kind of hindered her on that, you know, that contract of like how she kind of came into here. And the best thing that I can do is, in whatever way, shape, or form, no matter how small, is try to get her in touch with the brilliant and magnificent essence that is her. And I feel like that's like, for me, you know, you kind of mentioned like, you know, Rusty 2.0, you know, I've kind of seen it that way before, but one of the things that Master Thanaphol had taught me was, it's not that we're becoming this like better, you know, more evolved version of ourselves. It's that we're actually becoming ourselves, and we have all this stuff that was put onto us that slowly started to drift us away and change us from who we really are. And it's just all these practices and all this healing work and working through all this trauma is just a means to get you back to your natural self, just who you are. And I think that's incredible.
I agree. So Sadhu, where do we find more information about you? Because our stand in our hourglass has come to an end, unfortunately. And I appreciate your time, and I'm grateful you spent a little bit of time this morning with me. Awesome, awesome future for you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been good to chat with you this morning. You can find me on my website, which is www.thesadhudah.com, thesadhudah.com.
Yay. All right, my friends, I will catch you on the wild side. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. You're watching Living and Thriving with Rustie, and I'm Rustie, and I get to do this. This is like the coolest job on the planet, and it's not even a job, it's a passion. I love being able to have these conversations with people from all over the world, all walks of life, telling their story of who they are, what they are, and what they do now. We all have stuff in our life. We all have obstacles. We all have things, stories. But the question is, do you hold on to it, or do you let that story empower you? And in this case, he was totally empowered. And hey, he gets to hang out with elders. How cool is that? That's walking history books. Like, I think elders are walking encyclopedias. They're just amazing to talk to and learn from, because their perspective, as I always say, perspective is king, means a whole lot to your perspective. It gives you a different view. Know that you're loved, know that you're beautiful. And as I always say in every show, make sure you do something kind, whether it's send out a postcard to a long lost aunt, or buy a cup of coffee, or pay for a toll, or just smile at somebody. Most of us are mask free now, so you can smile. It's kind of weird getting back into the smiling thing after not having a mask. And I've got to stop giving the curmudgeon face when I don't want anybody to know that I'm being a curmudgeon. So, rewiring. It's all work. Until next time.